everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in here to Primetime Sportz Talk. This is the first episode of this series ever, and we are so excited to bring you a full talk series all about basketball. We are such big basketball fans here at Georgia State University, and hey, you wouldn't be watching the show if you weren't too, so we're excited to have you along for the ride, to join us in the conversation, because this is the show about our opinions about the facts, and we have no regrets here because we do this once, a one time only. In fact, David, there's a teleprompter right there in front of us, but there's something funny about the teleprompter, David.
Yeah, there's no words in the teleprompter.
There's no words?
No words.
Why aren't there words in the teleprompter, David? Could you tell our viewing audience?
Because we're one take Drake.
We don't need the teleprompter.
No.
We run this raw, and we're going to love sharing our opinions about the team, men's and women's, I should add, all season long with you. And hey, stay tuned for future episodes because we are going to do our very best to get you guys in here in case you hate our opinions, in case you love our opinions, and you want to talk about it with us. We would love to see that happen. So keep watching for more information about that in future episodes. But to begin, it's a new season in Georgia State basketball.
Yes, it is.
Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
Are you excited?
Absolutely.
I'm so excited. And with a new season of basketball comes new players, new rosters. For the men's and women's, we've got some great storylines, especially coming off of yesterday's games. Yeah. We got a treat yesterday. We double-dipped in opening season of basketball with the men's and women's playing, both at 7 o'clock on ESPN, the men's here at home, the women over at Kennesaw. The men, just as a preview, they played a relatively comfortable game. It was a 19-point lead that they won at the end. So they didn't, little things we can talk about there with them that they need to improve on throughout the season, but they did pretty comfortable. The women, though, wow, that was a nail biter. But fortunately, the women still had some nails left on their fingers because they managed to come out of there with a win, just edging it over Kennesaw State University, keeping a very narrow lead in the final 5 minutes of the game. And we're going to get more into that and a great storyline with their roster, in fact. So let's go ahead and open up with the men's basketball roster.
All right.
How about this roster, David? Let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players returning, which is great for the men's team because continuity from season to season is a key to success.
Absolutely.
And Georgia State men's basketball knows a lot about success, right? And this we're seeing a lot of continued success here the last few seasons, right? Georgia State men's basketball back-to-back Sun Belt regular season champions, best records in the Sun Belt Conference, and they're looking to get a little bit better every year.
Right.
Because let's kick it back 2 years ago, they go to the Sun Belt Conference tournament, and they get all the way to the finals, and who do they meet in the finals but none other than our conference rivals, of course, the Raging Cajun, Lafayette, Louisiana. Side note, would you believe the Lafayette, Louisiana Raging Cajun? You know what their mascot is?
What's their mascot?
It's a cayenne pepper, David.
Why?
The Raging Cajun's mascot is a cayenne pepper. Who was responsible for their marketing team? It's really difficult for me to be intimidated by cayenne pepper. But unfortunately, that cayenne pepper was a little too spicy for the Panthers because they ended up losing in overtime by a point.
Oh, man.
I believe it was 82-83, if
Oh.
I'm remembering in overtime. That was 2 years ago. So what did they do next year, right? They bounce back. They win the Sun Belt Conference regular season again, which wasn't easy to do, David, because
No.
there were 3 other teams in that conference that had more than 20 wins.
Exactly.
So it's not like Georgia State ran away with it. But then they go to the Sun Belt Conference tournament, and they meet the Cayenne Peppers in the semifinals, and they win. And then they go and they play huge in-state rival Georgia Southern, and they end up winning that game.
They did.
Another narrow win, but it was a victory. And they won the Sun Belt Conference tournament. And then what do they do? Gets them a seed in the NCAA March Madness tournament. They go and they face number 1 seeded Baylor, and they upset Baylor with what has now become a little bit of the Georgia State athletic legacy when R.J. Hunter, who now plays for the Boston Celtics, hits a deep virtual buzzer beater against Baylor to put Georgia State up in the final seconds of that game. We go into the round of 16, and we lose to Xavier in the following game. But now that we've saw 2 years ago they had success, the following year they had more success. Now this year we got 9 players returning, bunch of great new players. Malik Ben-Levy is one guy I want to highlight later on in the show. I think he's got a lot to do with the team's success in the future as a freshman. He looks like he's got a lot of promise. David, tell me this. How do the men get better this season? Are we going to see them in the round of 16? Are they going to win the round of 16? You know, it's never happened before. The men have never made it to the round of 16, they haven't ever won in the round of 16. Only 3 times have they ever even been to March Madness. I got 1991, 2001, and then, of course, last year, 2015. And what did they do in 2016? How did they get there, and how did they do it with this roster?
Well, what it's going to take is team basketball, because one of the things I saw from them yesterday is they don't really have that one guy that they give the ball to take over. That's what RJ's role was. When Georgia State was in trouble, they gave the ball to RJ and let RJ do what RJ does. Okay? They don't really have that anymore, so they're going to have to play more as a team, and they have a lot of new guys that haven't played together because this is kind of a new unit. So Ryan Harrow and RJ Hunt were the top 2 scorers last year, and they're gone. So now you have to kind of figure things out. Kevin Ware's not that much of a shooter. Isaiah Dennis is not that much of a shooter. So they're going to need to play team ball, pass the ball around, make that extra pass, and just get points on the board. That's all you really have to do. Play team ball, play as a unit, and you can honestly beat anybody. Just look at the Atlanta Hawks.
And they had their first opportunity to try to put all that together last night against Middle Georgia State, recently merged. College, I'm forgetting who they merged with that made them state. So you may only know them as Middle Georgia. A few years ago, though, they became Middle Georgia State. But they played each other in the GSU Sports Arena last night. And what did we see from the men's basketball team that made us excited for more this season? Because I got to be honest, David, I was a little bit disappointed. I think I would have liked to see more. Now, I know there's a chemistry thing. It's the first game of the season. You got a lot going on. But GSU, of course, is an NCAA Division I school, and Middle Georgia State, if you didn't know, is what's called an NAIA school. And I'm actually a transfer student from a different NAIA school, so I kind of understand the athletic feel. And there are really some well-competitive NAIA schools out there because sometimes, when players don't have the money or the academics required to put themselves in a Division I level or an NCAA level for that matter, they end up in these NAIA programs. And in these programs, there are players that are talented enough to play at the Division I level, Division II level, whatever it might be, and you just don't see them coming. And I think Middle Georgia had some flashes of that, especially defensively. It wasn't so much Middle Georgia's offense that sort of started to get them back in this game. It was their defense. And tell us, David, how that looked and what happened with Georgia State there as they started to sort of lose the lead a little bit.
I want to give credit to a guy that plays for them by the name of Joseph Fogg. He plays for Middle Georgia State. He came in and he played a great defensive game. He started crashing the boards late in the first half. He had a couple blocks. He had one in the second half. That was tremendous. I give the guy credit. He played a very good game for them. He stepped up when he needed to on the defensive side of the ball. But at the end of the day, it comes down to offensive firepower, and they just didn't have that when it came to competing.
Georgia State really was blowing the doors off Middle Georgia in the first half. I mean, it started to look like it wasn't even going to be close. I mean, I was going to turn the TV off at halftime at a certain point because I knew nothing exciting here was going to happen. And I can't really say anything exciting did happen after that. But at one point, Middle Georgia brought it within 9. Georgia State only had a 9-point lead, which, I mean, isn't necessarily a poor lead. But against an NCAA Division I school and an NAIA school, a 9-point lead isn't good. I mean, that's about as close as it ever gets. And what we saw from Middle Georgia is when they went into that man defense, Georgia State dominated. In fact, Kevin Ware took full advantage of that man defense in the first half. He was, if I have 2 words to describe the first half, it's Kevin Ware. I mean, that's the bottom line. He came out in that game, he hit the court, and he was all cylinders. And Middle Georgia had no answers. I mean, the turnovers were everywhere. We were dropping buckets like it was nobody's business. But then all of a sudden, Middle Georgia flipped into a zone defense. And then it looked like it gave Georgia State some problems. And I was disappointed with how physical they weren't in the zone defense.
It's one of those things where you kind of get into a rhythm and you're used to getting one defensive look, and then they change that look and you're like, oh, okay, what just happened? And then you have to feel it out. And we've previously mentioned, alluded to the chemistry that Georgia State doesn't really have right now with some of these new 5-man combos that they're putting on the court. So with new guys on the court and then a whole new defensive look from Middle Georgia State, it kind of threw Georgia State off. And it took Georgia State having to figure out how to do this on their own. Because I asked Coach Ron Hunter, I said, is there something you said or is there something that they had to figure out? He was like, no, they figured it out. So give credit to Georgia State for figuring out that zone defense.
Because it looked like they were dancing around the top of the 3-point line.
They were.
They were just sort of passing around. It sort of just looked like they were, I don't know, running a practice drill, against some kind of a scrimmage team. It didn't look like they were making plays. They just kind of continued to push the ball, and that was it. I didn't notice them driving the lane anymore. As soon as they switched into that zone defense, they being Middle Georgia, as soon as they switched into the zone defense, Georgia State stopped driving the ball. I don't know if that's a chemistry issue. I don't know if they didn't know whose responsibility it was to dive into the lane. Right. I don't know where the disconnect happened, but you're right. They figured it out for themselves because in the second half, that all changed. Yeah. It was there was a lot to do with the success that Georgia State had in the past, knowing how to overcome adversity. Right. Because Middle Georgia, again, they're an NAIA school. They don't necessarily know what it means to compete at the NCAA Division I level, and Georgia State managed to figure it out. Right, absolutely. So I give them all the credit in the world for that. Sure. But that wasn't the only game that was played yesterday. Of course, we had the women's game that was played yesterday, and that was a whole fantastic show in itself. I'll tell you what, there's not too much to be excited about when it comes to women's basketball necessarily. And that's not to be offensive, of course. It just, it is the lesser of the two sports nationwide as far as ratings goes. But if you were looking for a fun game, start to finish, you should have caught, and I'm sorry that you didn't get to catch, the Georgia State versus Kennesaw State University game yesterday in KSU. And how about this? I sort of previewed this in the beginning of the show. There's a great storyline with the women's roster. And check this out. Help me count these numbers, David, because I might lose count. I don't know if I can even count this high. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Did I get that right? Yeah, that's 10. That's 10. That's not 10 points, for one player. That's not 10 players returning to the team. No. That's 10 brand new players on the women's Georgia State basketball team this season. There's only 15 on the roster. That's 75% of this team is new this year. This may as well be the first time we've ever had a women's basketball program. I mean, that's the equivalent. We have a full team of new players. We do. We can hit the floor every game with this set of 10 new players. How about that, David? It's ridiculous, man. And it's a good reset, though. It's good for them because they didn't do so hot last year. Right. They went 13-17 overall. So there's definitely room for improvement. And it looks like they're trying to bring it in. Yes. They did a lot of recruiting. 5 of the 10 new players are all freshmen. So there's longevity here to be had. They've got a bunch of transfer students. They've got some juniors, some upperclassmen. So they're looking like there's going to be maybe some long-term success when they can essentially have a full team for many years to come. Because none of the new players that come in are seniors. The only, let's see here, make sure I get my numbers right. 2 of the 5 players that are returning are seniors. Ashley Cole and Morgan Jackson are the only 2 seniors on the team. So they're going to be moving on. But look at who they have to teach, right? And to continue to carry this legacy of Georgia State athletics. And I'll tell you what, the most impressive thing about yesterday was you go and play Kennesaw State University, who Georgia State in the series going into this game was 6-1 all time. So they know how to beat them. But these players don't. They're 10 brand new players. And to go on the road on the opening day, right? Some of these players have never even put on a Georgia State Panthers jersey before, and they go on the road and they beat KSU on the road to open the season with a brand new roster. That's impressive. I'm very impressed by them. Good job, ladies. Absolutely. And I'll say this, that it wasn't even so much that they beat them, but they beat them as a team, and they beat them well. I think there were some issues with the free throws near the end. I wish some of the women made more free throws because with only 5 minutes left, they only had a 2-point lead. So, or a 4-point lead, and then Kennesaw brought it within 2. So it looked like, it could swing either way in the final closing minutes, and Georgia State had their opportunities at the line to really spread that gap. And they missed 5 in a row at one point with under 5 minutes. And those are crucial points. Now, fortunately, their defense stepped up. In fact, their defense stepped up in the last few seconds, got a great steal, and then broke one down the court, got fouled, went to the line, and then made both those free throws to bring it to 4 points, with just seconds left in the game. So Kennesaw State had no chance at that point. But it was one amazing opening performance for the women's. David, what are your thoughts, man? They played a great game. I think it was a very back and forth game because at one point, they were fighting with the lead. It was tug of war pretty much. Right, it was tug of war. There's a new rule in women's college basketball. They play 4 quarters now. Right. They don't play 2 halves anymore. They play 4 quarters. So they had to play all 4 quarters. First time I get to say that about women's basketball, except for the WNBA. So they had to play all 4 quarters, and they did just that. You fight a team for the full game,
and I'm very proud of them for coming away at the end. But the free throws, that's my biggest pet peeve is missing free throws.
And the men weren't excused from that either.
No, they're not excused from that.
Right.
But both teams need to get better at free throw shooting. Okay, the women almost lost their game because of free throw shooting. And I'm gonna tell you, my head coach back when I played basketball for the World Changers Church Warriors when I was in the 4th grade, free throws win ball games.
Right,
that's what he said. Free throws win ball games, and they will cost you ball games. So make your free throws. That is it. Well, that's not it, but that's very important to make your free throws. And it almost cost the girls the game. And like you said, the guys, they don't get excused from that either.
No, they don't. I'm seeing if I can pull up the stats here. I got the men went 10 for 17 on free throws yesterday.
Yes, they did.
And let me see if I can get the women's stats here. While I do that, I want to bring up this number too, David. And you can touch on this more while I check these women's stats real quick.
Yeah.
Where we talked about the men dancing around the 3-point line and maybe what they need to do in the future to improve that, especially in the zone defense. Maybe gave them some problems. How about these numbers? Talk about the 7 for 27 from behind the 3-point line.
Yes.
They shot 27 three-pointers.
Yes, they did.
They only made 7.
Yeah.
Why'd they miss 20?
Well, I mean, it's first night. It could be nerves, could be some jitters. It's the first game of the season. They're a way better shooting team than what these numbers say. And you could say, the chemistry is a little bit off. It's a mental thing.
Sure.
Sports is really mental. It's very physical, but it's also a mental game. And I think it could have been nerves, things like that.
They lost a lot of shooters.
They did.
Right?
They lost their top 2 scorers.
Right. So they need to find that new person. Mm-hmm. And who knows? Look, we were in the locker room. Maybe RJ Hunter, Ron Hunter, his father, who's still the head coach. Maybe his purpose was in the zone defense. We're just going to put a whole bunch of threes up and see who can put them down. Yeah. And then we'll see if we can figure out who our shooter is early. No, maybe that was the goal. I mean, if you told me that was the case, I would have believed it because, again, 27 three-pointers. Yeah. Good Lord. And more than half of them came in the second half. Mm-hmm. So it was unbelievable. But here, I got the stats for the women's free throws. They were 13 for 25 on the game, which it's about 50% from the free-point line. I mean, you would have thought that, Schiele O'Neal kissed the ball for good luck going into the game because it didn't really come across like they were comfortable at the line. They were fortunate to get away with one. I'll give you that. Yeah. And they played hard, especially on the defensive side of the ball, all the way to the final triple zeros on the clock. But going in, if they're going to improve from 13 and 17,
yes,
they got to hit their free throws.
Absolutely.
And they got to find continuity in these 10 new players, which I'm excited to watch. So, David, let's transition into our final segment.
All right.
We're going to go game balls.
Game balls.
Right? And here's the thing about this segment. We're going to give it a game ball to the men's and women's team or whoever we're talking about on the show, depending on the episode. And David's got his 2 picks. I've got my 2 picks. But we haven't discussed this yet. No. So we're going to be as surprised as you are when we hear each other's game balls. So, David, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. Okay. And let's go ahead and you give me your men's pick.
Men's pick, I'm going with Isaiah Williams. And the reason I'm going with Isaiah Williams is because he started the second half for Isaiah Dennis. There was kind of, Coach Ron Hunter said Isaiah Dennis was getting a little stagnant towards the end of the first half when Middle Georgia State switched it up on him. And he let Isaiah Williams go out there. And Isaiah Williams did a good job in changing the tempo of the game, kind of a change of pace for Georgia State. He did a great job. If I take a look at these numbers here, he hit 2 big 3-pointers. They were huge in the second half. He also came away with 10 total points. Ended up playing 25 minutes in that game, so I definitely give him the game ball. He did a great job, changed the pace for Georgia State, and helped Georgia State get that momentum back.
I think that was a great pick because I saw something from Isaiah Williams that made me excited. And maybe this is a term we're going to use in the future, but it was an R.J. Hunter-style three-pointer in the second half. He hit that three-pointer from deep on the top left side of that key. I tell you what, he was just wide open. No one even gave him a chance to take that three-pointer, and he took full advantage of that space. He must have dropped that thing 4 feet behind the top of the line. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I was impressed. And it was R.J. Hunter all over again, and maybe that's something we're going to use in the future to describe three-pointers. It's R.J. Hunter-esque, as we may call it. But my game ball for the men's, it's got to be Malik Benlevy. And I sort of talked about this in the beginning and maybe hinted this a little bit prematurely in the early start of the show, how I was going to highlight this guy. And were the numbers there? Not necessarily. He didn't necessarily put a lot of points on the board. He didn't necessarily have a lot of steals. And it's easy to give it to somebody like, Isaiah Williams. Not to say yours wasn't good. It was good. Yep. But, he's been there before. He understands the system. It's easy to give it to someone like Kevin Ware, right, who's known for his success on the court. But Malik Benlevy is a freshman coming into the team. The reason I'm giving him the game ball for the men's is because there looks like there's something here that's going to be great. He looks like he just gets it. He was physical when he needed to be physical. He was driving the lane when he needed to be driving the lane. Just working on his finishing is something he's going to have to do throughout the year. And look, it's his first game in the college level. You can expect that kind of stuff from somebody of his age. You can expect that kind of stuff to improve throughout the season. And if there's anybody I can see as sort of the rising star, maybe not even just for Georgia State, but the Sun Belt Conference, I think Malik Ben-Levy is the guy that we need to be paying attention to, and other teams in the Sun Belt Conference needing to be paying attention to as the sleeper coming off the bench.
All right.
So how about your women's team, David? Go ahead for me.
Women's team goes to the young lady by the name of Elijah Mitchell. 6-foot junior. She's one of the new players. Came away with 10 rebounds. She crashed the boards yesterday, and that's huge. I was a big guy. Of course, I'm not as big anymore. You see Joey sitting next to me. He's bigger than me. But when I was little, I was big. So I was one of the big kids on the team. So I was a forward just like she is, and getting rebounds, that's big. You always want rebounds. Getting the ball back for your team is huge. I'm not a big score all the points guy. So, I'm impressed with guys like Steph Curry and things like that if you can score a lot of points. But who can go in there and crash the boards? Who can get some rebounds? That's my big thing. So Elijah Mitchell did that yesterday for the women's team, so she gets the game ball.
And that was sort of the emphasis on how well they played defensively near the end.
Yes.
Right? You don't get chances to keep your lead if you don't get the ball back.
Yeah.
So defensively, you got to go down and get that rebound.
Exactly.
So she managed to do that for the team. That maybe was the biggest contributor to why they were able to hang on to that lead against Kennesaw. In Kennesaw, again, 10 new women on the roster.
10.
Which is crazy. And that's a good segue into my game ball for the women's team.
All right.
Right, let's see. I could give it to Makiva Ponder. Right, she had the most goals for the team. I could give it to one of the seniors for being the leaders on the team and helping these new players and all this stuff, getting the win. I'm sure they had a lot to do with it. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to maybe throw you a curveball, David. Very first episode, I'm not giving it to a player. So who am I giving it to? I'm giving it to Sharon Baldwin-Tenner. And you're going, who the heck is that? That's the women's head coach. And here's why I'm giving the game ball to Sharon Baldwin-Tenner. Because, do I need to say it again? 10 new players on the roster. First game of the season on the road against Kennesaw, and they come out with a win. And it wasn't an easy win. It was a win that came with some adversity, and they held their stuff together. They did what they needed to do. They got their rebounds, right? And you even said, one of the new players, 10 rebounds.
Yeah.
That stuff just doesn't happen on itself overnight. That takes great coaching. It takes a good understanding of the system of Georgia State women's basketball. She's going into her 7th year as the head coach, which is going to do a lot for the team going forward because she understands what these players need to do to actually come out and succeed and do better than 13 and 17. Which I'll tell you what, David, I'm a skeptic when it comes to early season predictions.
Okay.
I'm a skeptic. So I'm not going to give you too much to go off of here, so you can't hold me to this.
Okay.
But I'm betting the women do better than 13 and 17. I don't know what yet. We're going to see as the season goes on. But I'm willing to put my money down and say, whatever it is, it's better than 13 and 17. Maybe it's 14 and 16, but hey, that's better than 13 and 17.
Yes.
Am I right? So let's see what we do. Well, I think that's about time.
Yeah.
I think we've given out our game balls. This was fun. Hey, guys, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. Again, we're going to give you as many of these episodes as possible moving on to other games throughout the season. So continue to tune in here to GSTV, the YouTube page, Panther Report, the Facebook page, Primetime Sportz YouTube page, all that stuff. It's all going to be posted. You can't miss it. It's going to be fantastic. So, hey, thank you so much again for tuning in. I'm Joey Redman. This is David Schiele, and we will see you next time.